Hello everybody, what's going on? This is Mr. Effect Films here, yet again after a super long break. This is going to be a response to a video that Eric just did about a week ago on the Geekvolution channel he did this for May the 4th, because of the whole, May the 4th be with you. It's sort of unofficially Star Wars Day, whatever. You get the idea. And, For May the 4th, Eric had done a list of his own personal recommendations for the Star Wars Legends Expanded Universe continuity. If you don't know, everything under Star Wars Legends is basically, if it came out before the Expanded Universe was deemed Legends as of April of 2014, anything Expanded Universe that came out prior to that is considered Legends by Lucasfilm and the official story group and everything. And so the whole video, Eric was just giving his own personal recommendations on stuff from the Legends continuity that he would recommend people try if they want to, if they're either getting into the Expanded Universe period, or if they're already into the EU, but they just haven't read anything Legends and, by extension, stuff that isn't officially canon. And I really liked that video. I thought that was really cool. And it made me feel the need to do my own as well, not just because I've got several different picks here, but also because one thing you'll notice about Eric's list is that he didn't mention any of the video games, and he explains why. It's because, growing up, he didn't play a whole lot of Star Wars video games and stuff, or at least all the ones that were considered the best. And I have some of those here on my list, so I figured that alone was reason enough for me to at least do my own list. So that's what this is going to be. This is going to be me giving my own Star Wars Legends recommendations. I'm probably going to end up posting this as a response to the video Eric did. So if you see that one, or if you watch this one first, you can go watch Eric's, or if you watch Eric's, then you can watch this one, whatever. I'll figure something out. So anyway, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to do this in 3 categories. I'm going to do novel recommendations, video game recommendations, and then after that I'm going to have some honorable mentions. I should also make sure I get this out there. I will not be mentioning any of the comic books here, because if you watch Eric's video, pretty much half of his recommendations are comic books. And so he ended up pretty much mentioning all of the best ones that I would have mentioned anyways. So, like he mentions the Legacy comics, Tales of the Jedi, the Clone Wars, I think he even brought up Dawn of the Jedi, all of which are great and some of my favorite Star Wars comics. So yeah, in the end, I decided it would be best if I just didn't mention comic books, because, like I said, Eric brought up all the best ones anyways. So this is going to be me just focusing on the novels. There's a few audio dramas on here, I think. Yeah, no. I have one audio drama on this list. The rest are either novels or video games. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the list. So, for starters, we're going to start off with the novels, and first one I have on here is called Allegiance, which was written by Timothy Zahn back in 2011, I want to say, 2012, around that time, a few years before the EU retcon happened. And I'm not saying this is necessarily Timothy Zahn's best work, but I think it's my favorite that he's done, at least so far. There have been a few rumors suggesting that he might be writing something for the new canon. I hope he does. I really like Timothy Zahn's work, and I especially really love this book. This book mainly focuses on a group of stormtroopers who defect from the Empire and essentially just become rogue stormtroopers. I guess similar to what we saw in The Force Awakens with Finn. The difference here, though, is that these guys, because I should also mention, this takes place in between episodes 4 and 5. So the rebellion is still fighting the Empire, Luke is still training to become a Jedi and all of that. That's all still going on. What's interesting to know here is that these stormtroopers don't defect and join the rebellion. They kind of just become rogue stormtroopers. That's something they make clear throughout the whole book, is they still consider themselves stormtroopers. They still go around all of Imperial space and solve problems and stuff like that. But the whole thing is they do it the way Imperial stormtroopers should be. That's kind of the whole idea, is that these stormtroopers essentially represent what Imperial stormtroopers ought to be. They go through a similar thing that Finn did in Force Awakens, where they're asked to do something absolutely horrendous and just nonsensical, and they can't do it. They disagree, and they walk away from the Empire. But like I said, they still feel that at heart they are stormtroopers, and they still operate as they feel stormtroopers should. They're just not officially recognized by the Empire anymore. And that's a really fascinating story, and It's really, really cool. The other thing this book heavily focuses on is Mara Jade. Now, Mara Jade, if you don't know, is one of the most beloved Expanded Universe characters of all time, and is one of my personal favorites. I really, really like Mara Jade in this. And I feel like this book does a good job of establishing who Mara Jade is, her loyalty to the Empire, and especially to Palpatine himself, since she is the Emperor's hand. But it also does a great job of showing that while she is on the dark side right now, she's not naturally pulled to the dark side. There's a moment in particular towards the end that I think does a good job of showing that Mara Jade is somebody who, if given the chance, could be a good person. And that's important for considering where her character goes later in the Legends timeline. So all of that is really good. The only real negative I have about this book is whenever we shift focus to Han, Luke, and Leia, I kind of lose interest. I don't really care about anything going on with them. Mostly because we already know where their story's going, but also because just what they're doing just isn't all that much of an interest to me, except for when they cross paths with Mara Jade or the rogue stormtroopers. Whenever that happens, I am interested in what's going on with them. Otherwise, I don't really care. Thankfully, moments like those are very few and far between in this book. Like I said, mostly it focuses on either Mara Jade or the rogue stormtroopers. So, for those reasons, I highly recommend Allegiance. It's one of my favorites from Timothy Zahn, and if you enjoy anything of his work, I think you'll enjoy this. Alright, next up is Star Wars The Old Republic Deceived. There's quite a few novels that take place in the Old Republic era, but this is easily my favorite. The Old Republic Deceived, first of all, I should say this is written by Paul S. Kemp, who's done quite a lot of works in the past. You'll notice that Paul S. Kemp seems to really love dealing with stuff that deals with the dark side and the Sith at large. He just did this recently again last year with the novel Lords of the Sith, and I think he did something called The Tribes of the Sith or something like that. That was done like back in 2001, 2002, something like that. He really likes dealing with that area of Star Wars with the dark side and the Sith, and this is definitely one of his best examples of that. This book mainly focuses on two characters. One is a Jedi girl whose name I can't remember. It's been a while since I've read Deceived. I can't remember her name. And then the other is a Sith warrior by the name of Darth Malgus. Darth Malgus is one of my favorite Sith Lords in all of Star Wars. He's really, really cool. He's a very fascinating character. What makes this good, though, is that both the Jedi girl and Malgus, their stories in this book are very different, while at the same time being very, very similar. The whole thing is that they're both dealing with temptation and pull from the opposite side of the Force that they respectively serve. So Malgus is kind of dealing, he is a Darksider at heart. He is absolutely a Sith warrior. He lives for the thrill of battle. He loves to fight. He loves the dark side. But there are a few moments, particularly dealing with a certain person in his life, where he does kind of feel that light side tug a little bit. By contrast, this Jedi girl, who I really hate that I can't remember her name, but she's dealing with a little bit of dark side temptation, mainly because of something that happens with her master during the early chapters of this book. Something happens with him, I'm not going to give away what, and basically from that point onwards, she's dealing with some major dark side temptation throughout this whole book. And by the end, both of them come to conquer that temptation, but in very different ways. There's a few other things going on. There's this whole subplot dealing with this spy smuggler, and I think there was something else dealing with a bounty hunter or something. I could be wrong about that. But the Jedi girl and Malgus, they are the two main characters of this book, and they're absolutely the focus of it, and the absolute reason to read this. Just everything going on with them is fantastic. This makes for a great story. It's my favorite of the Old Republic novels, and if you have any interest in the Old Republic era at all, I would absolutely recommend this to you. It's great. Alright, next up is a novel that nobody really talks about anymore, and I'm shocked because this is a really, really good one. It's called I, Jedi, which is written by Matthew Stackpole. And this book introduces us to the character Corran Horn, who has since become a fairly popular character in the Expanded Universe. I didn't know a whole lot about him before I came across this, and funny enough, I didn't even know this novel existed until last year when Heir to the Jedi came out. which was a novel written from the first-person perspective of Luke. And so the reason people were talking about this was because up until that time, the only other Star Wars novel that had been written from a character's first-person perspective was this, I, Jedi. This whole book is written from the first-person perspective of Corran Horn. And if I remember right, it never leaves his perspective. It never shifts to somebody else's first-person point of view or anything like that. We are with Corran Horn and in his head this entire novel. And I think it's done perfectly. This has become one of my favorite EU novels, and like I said, it's a shame because nobody talks about this book. It's really, really a shame. So the whole gist of this book is Corran Horn basically comes home one day and finds out that his wife has gone missing. And so the whole rest of the novel is him traveling across the galaxy, getting into all these crazy adventures and situations, all to find out what's going on with her and save her from what's happened. Now, of course, this is Star Wars, so there's a lot more to it than that. The plot, of course, thickens a lot, and lots of stuff goes down. But what remains the most memorable thing about this book is two things. One, the character of Corran Horn himself. He's really cool. He's got an interesting perspective on things. I don't want to give too much of that away. But one thing I will briefly touch on is his own personal temptation, not necessarily with the light or the dark side, although that does play a role later. Corran Horn is dealing with something I rarely see in a Star Wars story, and that is sexual temptation. During one of his infiltration jobs to find out what's been going down with his wife and why she went missing, there's a scene where he is very strongly tempted to cheat on his wife, and it's really, really, I can't really describe it as anything other than interesting, and I love the fact that he accepts that this is happening to him, and then he deals with it, and then he overcomes it, as a Jedi should. I don't think I've seen anything on a mature level like that dealt with so properly in a Star Wars novel, because there have been things like that in Star Wars novels before, but never dealt in the way they are with this. And just those reasons and many more are reason enough for me to recommend I, Jedi. This is one of my favorite EU stories. I'm just absolutely astounded that nobody talks about this. Nobody even seems to know it exists. But if you can find it, if you can just find the audiobook or something like that, definitely check this book out. I absolutely think it's worth your time. Alright, so next up on the list is Darth Plagueis, which is written by James Luceno, who is one of my favorite Star Wars authors. James Luceno's work rarely disappoints. Before this, he had done things like, he had done Labyrinth of Evil, he had done Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, and most recently he did the Tarkin novel, which came out back in 2014, I believe. I think it was like November of 2014 that came out. All of which were great, but this, I think, is easily the best thing he's ever done. If you haven't noticed, I tend to pick, when it comes to these novels, I'm trying to pick the best of the best from these respective writers, just because I feel like if I'm going to recommend something to somebody, I should recommend the best, right? But Darth Plagueis is, like I said, my favorite of James Luceno's works, and in my opinion, the best he's ever done. So as the title implies, this whole book mainly focuses on Darth Plagueis. But there is a secondary protagonist, and I don't think this is a spoiler because he's on the cover. But this book also just as much focuses on Palpatine, who of course we know was Darth Plagueis' apprentice. And the whole thing with with him training Palpatine, their rise to power, how they slowly begin planting seeds throughout the galaxy, and especially throughout the Galactic Senate and the whole political side of things, that will eventually let Palpatine create the Clone Army, start the Clone Wars, and then eventually execute Order 66 and take over the whole galaxy. This book is basically the beginnings of all of that. Now, this is James Luceno, which means there's going to be a lot of politics and a lot of talking, lots and lots of wordy dialogue in this. If that's not your thing, I understand, and you might want to maybe check out some reviews or other people's opinions or something like that first before you check this out. If you're not swayed by that, if that doesn't bother you, then I absolutely recommend this novel to anyone who has an interest in either Star Wars itself, the political side of Star Wars, and especially if you're interested in the dark side and everything concerning the Sith. There's some great tie-ins to the Old Republic era with this. some things mentioned with Darth Bane happen here. There's some great foreshadowing for things that'll happen later in the Star Wars chronology. It's just, this book works on so many levels, and there's a great scene with another character who I'm not going to reveal, but there's another great scene with the introduction of another character who I did not see coming at all, and it really shocked me. And like I said, I'm not going to give away what it is, but when you read this, you'll know the scene when it comes, because it absolutely floored me, and it made me really excited, and that was really cool. So yeah, if you've not read this, Darth Plagueis by James Luceno, definitely check it out. It's great. Alright, so the last one on my recommendations as far as novels go is, it's a Clone Wars novel. It's the only Clone Wars novel I have here, and that is Yoda Dark Rendezvous, which is written by Sean Stewart. To my knowledge, he hasn't really done much with Star Wars. If he has, I'm not aware of it. This is the only thing I'm aware of that Sean Stewart's done, and it's really, really great. It's my favorite of all the Clone Wars novels. This book mainly focuses on Yoda and Count Dooku and their relationship as master and apprentice, despite the fact that, of course, by now Dooku has left the Jedi and become Darth Tyrannus. And just everything concerning them, their relationship works on so many levels. They work as friends, as old-timers, as old friends, as master and apprentice. Even a father-son relationship can be seen at times between these two. And it's just really, really cool. There's a strong implication in this novel, and to a degree, even in the Clone Wars TV show, but especially in this novel, there's a strong implication that there could indeed be a Force bond between these two. And given how importantly their relationship is played up, it would not surprise me if that turned out to be a fact. There is a whole other subplot going on with these younger Jedi, and just some stuff going on with them and their day-to-day training. And there's a great scene in this with Asajj Ventress that is excellent and is just really, really cool. But as I said, this novel mainly focuses on Yoda and Count Dooku. And I don't want to say too much more than that. I probably have already said too much more than I should. But just, if you have any interest in either the Clone Wars era, Yoda, or Count Dooku, I definitely say check this book out. But especially if you're interested in the Clone Wars era. Not necessarily the Clone Wars TV show, because this doesn't have anything to do with that at all. But if you're interested in the Clone Wars era, Yoda, or Count Dooku, definitely check this out. It's really, really great. Alright, so that's it for my novel recommendations. We're not going to move on to the video games side of things. And we're going to start off with not only my favorite Star Wars video game of all time, but with what I also consider to be the single greatest Star Wars story ever told, and that is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I absolutely love this game so much. This game, even more so than the movies, this game encompasses everything I love about Star Wars. There is so much balance between everything. There's balance as far as just simply seeing the galaxy at large, people's day-to-day lives on certain planets, lots of political struggles, land skirmishes, disputes, and all these other things. But we also get a lot of mythology, and we get a lot of hints and references to things that have to deal with the Jedi and the Sith, and things that even predate the Jedi and the Sith as far as the Force and that whole mythos goes. There's just so much to love here. Lots of things that get built upon and tie into things later. This game very heavily ties into the Tales of the Jedi stuff, especially once you get to the planet Korriban. There's a lot of tie-ins to Tales of the Jedi there. Not to mention, this video game has one of the best plot twists of any game I've ever played. If you've played this game, of course you already know what the twist is, and if you haven't, you may or may not know about it just because of how much the twist is talked about. But despite that, I'm not going to talk about it, because if you've not played this game and you've somehow managed to avoid it, I want it to be as big a surprise for you as it was for me. It's absolutely mind-blowing, but it makes perfect sense. One thing I can definitely say about this game is that this is a game that demands a second playthrough. Which is already saying something, because this is a pretty long game. It took me about 50 or so hours to play it my first time through, but I've played it so many times now, I can beat it in maybe 25 hours or something like that. So, but yeah, this is a game that absolutely demands a second playthrough. There are so many things that seem to make a bit more sense. There's a lot of foreshadowing you don't notice the first time around. There's a lot of winks and nods to things as you don't notice the first time around. This is a game that demands a second playthrough. It's absolutely fantastic. It's still my favorite BioWare game today. BioWare's made a lot of great games in their time, but this is still my favorite of it. And it's my favorite Star Wars game, my favorite Star Wars story. every single character is fun, enjoyable, and very well written and incredibly developed. Just if you've not played this game, first of all, where the heck have you been for the last, 10 some odd years that this game's been out? But for real though, if you've not played this game and you're a Star Wars fan, you owe it to yourself. Play Knights of the Old Republic. It's amazing. Alright, so next we're going to move on to Star Wars Battlefront 2, which I know might seem like an odd pick as far as story and lore related expanded universe content goes, but I put this on here mainly because of the main campaign that Battlefront 2 offers. It's the whole story is told from the point of view of one of the clones in the 501st Legion. It starts off in the time of the Clone Wars, obviously. By the time the story ends, though, we're actually in the middle of the original trilogy, presumably before the Death Star's destroyed, although I could be wrong about that. It's been a while since I've played this game. And that's all very, very interesting. I really love all that. It's really cool to see the clones' side of things, hear their side of the story. There's a moment in particular where they mention how it's a mission that involves Ayla Sakura and how they helped her take control of something going on the planet. I think it was Felucia or something. I forget which. But they mentioned helping her out with a certain mission, and when it was over, they mentioned how Ayla Sakura called them the bravest soldier she'd ever known. And one of the clones has a quote following that when he says, "It's a good thing we were all wearing helmets because none of us could bear to look her in the eye." And just that moment has just always kind of stuck with me because it really goes a long way to show how, whether or not these guys knew about Order 66 ahead of time, they knew something was going to go down, and not all of them were okay with it. And now, of course, the Clone Wars TV show kind of retconned this a little bit to say that while some of the clones may have had disagreements with the Republic and stuff about how things are going, none of them knew about Order 66. This game, though, seems to imply that some of them, if not all of them, did know, and maybe felt more than a little guilty about it even before it happened, just because they kind of built something a relationship with them. And that's all really, really great, and I really like all that stuff. And not to mention, this is just an incredibly fun game to play. When I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do with this game was play as Darth Maul. You load up the mission on Coruscant, kill enough people so the game will let you choose your hero, because that's kind of how this game works, is by default, you're either playing as clones or the CIS or something like that, and you have to kill enough people on the opposite side, and then after that, it'll let you play as a hero character, and Darth Maul was one of them. And that was just my absolute favorite thing to do, was just run around as Darth Maul, cut people up, blast them away with the power of the Force. Oh my god, I'm getting waves of nostalgia just thinking about it. It was so much fun. So yeah, that was all really cool. And yeah, it's just a great fun game to play with enough story in there to hold your interest as well. So I absolutely recommend Star Wars Battlefront 2. Alright, next up is the Jedi Knight trilogy, which isn't the official name of these games. And in fact, Eric actually mentioned the audio drama versions of these games, which I have listened to, and they're quite good. But I'm specifically talking about the video games here, which encompasses, there's technically 4 of these. I only really talk about 3 of them because, from what I understand, nobody really cares that much about the first Dark Forces. I could be wrong about that, but I've never really seen anybody show that much particular fondness or interest for that first Dark Forces game. The audio drama for the first Dark Forces story is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but that first game, I don't really know of that many people who care that much about it. Like I said, I could totally be wrong. So, for me, the Jedi Knight trilogy really begins with Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, and continues into Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, and ends with Jedi Knight 3 Jedi Academy. This whole story mainly follows Kyle Katarn and his journey from going to he starts out as an Imperial. He's a young trainee in the Imperial Academy, trained to be a stormtrooper, and after the death of his father, he defects and eventually joins the rebellion. And then from there, he transitions from that to eventually becoming a Jedi. And it's a really great tale. Kyle Katarn is a fantastic character. He's since become one of the most beloved and most famous expanded universe characters of all time, and for good reason. Kyle Katarn is really, really cool. He's got a good swag about him. He's almost like, I think a good way to describe this is, imagine if Han Solo had been the Jedi in the original trilogy instead of Luke. and I think you have a pretty good idea of what to expect here. That's not exactly what it is. I may be oversimplifying that a bit, but in a nutshell, that is kind of sort of what this is. Just to give you an idea of what to expect. The gameplay is still pretty good. It holds up across all 3 games, and although I should mention, the third game, just so that you don't feel misled, the third game does shift focus of characters a bit. Like I said, Jedi Knight 1 and Jedi Knight 2 mostly focus on Kyle Katarn. The third game puts Kyle Katarn in more of a mentor role to the new main character, who is Jaden Core. And he has since gone on and had a few other stories in the expanded universe as well, mostly through novels. But he is the new main character when we get to Jedi Knight 3, and then, like I said, Kyle Katarn is just more, he is the mentor. He has gone through his journey, he's become a Jedi Master, and now he's mentoring the next generation of Jedi. Which is cool. I feel like that was a fitting way to end his story, at least as far as this trilogy is concerned. But I just felt the need to clarify that. But as far as the gameplay goes, the gameplay is actually pretty good. It holds up well enough. It doesn't feel too dated for its time. One thing people often mention is how the lightsaber combat in this game is the best that has ever been in any Star Wars game, and I absolutely agree. Especially once we get to Jedi Knights 2 and 3, the lightsaber combat is fantastic. It really feels like it ought to. One slice from a lightsaber can kill you, or if you're careful, it can end your opponent's life very quickly. It feels exactly like it ought to. And so when lightsaber fights go on for a long time like they do in the movies, it feels really tense, it feels really epic, it feels adrenalizing as all crap, man. It's great. So yeah, these are fantastic games. And they're great to play in co-op mode with other people. People actually still will load up servers to play these online with other people, and it's really, really great. You know, there's a reason people still play these games and talk about them. It's really, really good. So if you've not played these, I absolutely recommend them. They're fantastic. So definitely give the Jedi Knight trilogy a go. Alright, next up is Star Wars The Force Unleashed, which is one of the newer Star Wars games to come out in the last few years, along with Force Unleashed 2. But I'm really just recommending the first one, mainly because the first game, in my opinion, has a far better story and far better characterization than the second one does. Not that the second one's bad, it's just, to me, it was a bit of a letdown. But Force Unleashed 1 is really, really great. This was the introduction to what is now a very popular and beloved Star Wars character, and that is Galen Merrick, aka Starkiller. And he's one of my favorites as well. I've really come to like Starkiller over the years, and his whole character journey in this game is just great. It's really, really good. It kind of sort of his characterization in a nutshell is kind of sort of like Luke if Luke had started out on the dark side and went to the light. But the story he has itself almost kind of foreshadows what will eventually happen with Vader, with him being redeemed from the dark side a little bit. I don't think it's a coincidence that Vader himself is a prominent character in this game. But yeah, and of course the other characters are great. Rom Koda is really cool. Geno Clips is great, and Proxy is hysterical. I really, really like Proxy in this. He was kind of conceived of as, he's C-3PO if C-3PO were a psychopath. That's something you'll often hear Sam Witwer say when he gets in interviews and talks to people about this game, is Proxy is basically C-3PO if 3PO were a psychopath. and it definitely shows. Proxy is really cool, but he's also, in my opinion, far more useful and helpful than 3PO ever was, since, you know, Proxy actually has combative capabilities built into him. So yeah, this game is really, really great. The gameplay, while basic and simple to a degree, is still fun and enjoyable. At least I think it is. Although one thing you'll notice, and I'm going to be bringing up the Force Unleashed novelization here later on, but one thing you'll notice with this game is that there are some parts that feel kind of unfinished and rushed, and that is no fault of the developers at LucasArts who made this game. That is entirely due to time restraints. If you don't know, the guys at LucasArts were being very, very ambitious with this game. There was a lot they were trying to do, a lot they were trying to implement, a lot of things they wanted to get done. And in the end, they just kind of ran out of time and they couldn't do it all. So there are some character things that feel unfinished. There are some plot elements that feel like they're brought up and resolved a little too quickly and things like that. But like I said, that isn't the fault of the people who worked on this game. It's just, like I said, they were trying a lot and they ran out of time. It's as simple as that, really. But the game itself is still fantastic. This game has some great boss fights. My two favorites are probably the one at the beginning with Ram Koda, and I don't think this is a spoiler. It should be obvious, but then the second to last fight at the end with Darth Vader. Those two boss fights are just incredible, and I absolutely love them. So yeah, this whole game is really, really good. It's a little unfinished, you can kind of tell, but as I said, that's not the fault of the people that made this game, and in my opinion at least, it doesn't break it. This is still a really good game, really fun to play. So yeah, if you've not played The Force Unleashed, I think it's worth your time. Give it a go. Alright, so the last one I have here is technically not really expanded universe, although I think I can build enough of an argument to say that it is. And that is the Revenge of the Sith video game adaptation, which came out for PlayStation 2 and Xbox back in the day as Revenge of the Sith movie was getting ready to come out. Now, the reason I put this on here as far as expanded universe stuff is because the novelization of the Revenge of the Sith is considered expanded universe because of all that it adds back, because of not just how much of it ties into the movie, but because of how much it adds to the movie. And as far as I know, that novelization is considered official canon even now, as well. Everything that doesn't contradict what we see in the movie is considered official canon. So the novelization is at least in part considered expanded universe in and of itself. And pretty much everything in the novelization and in this game was meant to be in the movie, and in fact was in the movie at one point, but was cut out for time. And I think that adds a great deal of reasoning to play this, because you're not just simply playing the movie. You're gonna be seeing and playing a lot of things that were intended to be in the film, but for whatever reason had to be cut out. So you're gonna get to see a lot of different and new things that will maybe change your perspective, or at least give you more perspective on the story of Revenge of the Sith. So that, I feel like that alone is reason enough to play this. But then on top of that, this is a really fun game to play too. Probably my favorite thing to do with me and my little brother back when we had this was there was a 2-player mode, kind of similar to what you'd find in a fighting game. I kind of always thought of it as it's kind of Star Wars Mortal Kombat, because I mean, you pick your 2 characters, you pick a stage to fight in, and then you fight it out. It's kind of what it was Star Wars Mortal Kombat, and I always thought that was really cool, really, really great. And lots and lots of fun. I have a lot of fond memories of doing that with me and my brother. So, for those reasons, I would definitely say, give the Revenge of the Sith video game a try. Unless you're one of those people that really hates the prequels. I personally have never been that person. I have a lot of fondness for them, and in the case of Revenge of the Sith, I actually really like that movie. I don't care what anybody says. I think Revenge of the Sith is a good movie. And this game and then the novelization only made me feel that way more so. So, yeah, I would recommend this to people. Alright, so that's it for the video game side of things. We're now going to move on to my honorable mentions. And first up is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords, which of course is the sequel to Knights of the Old Republic that I mentioned earlier. This was not made by BioWare. This was actually made by Obsidian Entertainment. And if memory serves, BioWare was offered the job to make this game, but they were working on Jade Empire at the time, so they turned it down, and Obsidian got the job instead. Knights of the Republic 2, let me just be clear, is not a bad game. It's not a bad game at all. It's actually rather good. The problem for me is that, well, it kind of has a similar problem to The Force Unleashed, which is that it feels very unfinished. But also, like Force Unleashed, I can't really fault the developers for that, because they too ran out of time. And in their case, it was actually more severe than with The Force Unleashed. Force Unleashed just lost a few moments and a few character things and a few story details that would have tied things together more nicely. But at the end of the day, everything still plays out rather well. But with Knights of the Old Republic, there's entire plot elements and story threads that are just dropped. From what I understand, there's an entire planet worth of content that didn't get done because of just they ran out of time. KOTOR 1 came out in 2003, and then KOTOR 2 came out in 2004, so they barely had a year's worth of time to develop this game. So yeah, like I said, I can't really fault the developers for that, but it does hurt my enjoyment of this game, as well as just the simple fact of KOTOR 1, while very different, just by concept. I mean, you're setting this 4,000 years before the movies. Obviously, it's going to feel different. But at the end of the day, it still felt like classic Star Wars. It was fun. It was adventurous. It had darkness. It had moments of seriousness to it. But the characters always rose above those moments. They'd never let those moments hold them back and keep them down. At the end of the day, they rose above those darker moments, and you always felt a sense of hope, even in the midst of those darker moments. KOTOR 2 isn't like that. KOTOR 2 plays out more like what you would expect from maybe a James Luceno novel, where it starts dark and cynical and it ends dark and cynical. Now, while that might be appealing to some people, I've never found that appealing, at least not in a video game form. For James Luceno's books, I think that works very, very well. In fact, I'll go as far as to say, I think KOTOR 2 would have been better served as a novel than as a game. That might sound like heresy to some people, especially those who really like KOTOR 2, and I like KOTOR 2 as well, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, I think this is a story that would have been better served as a novel than as a game. As a game, it's fine, and it's good for the most part, but like I said, moments like that just kind of get under my skin as somebody who really prefers Star Wars as something that has moments of seriousness and darkness in it, but on the whole is usually optimistic. That's just kind of how I prefer Star Wars to be. So if you're not put off by the things I'm complaining about here, I absolutely recommend KOTOR 2, and especially if you enjoy the first game and you want to know what happens next, definitely give KOTOR 2 a go. I don't like these characters as much as the first game's characters, but they're still good, they're still well developed, the dialogue is just as good as it's ever been, and it's a well-written game, too. I know I was complaining about how dark and cynical it is, but despite that, it is very well-written. Again, I don't think it's as well-written as the first game, but it's very, very well-written, all things considered. So yeah, I would recommend KOTOR 2 if you enjoy the first game, and again, if the things I complained about don't bother you. So if you take all those things into consideration, then yes, I would recommend KOTOR 2. Alright, the next up is a novel written by John Jackson Miller called Kenobi. And the whole point of this book is basically to just give us a little bit of insight on Obi-Wan in between episodes 3 and 4. And there's a few things going on here, but basically the whole gist of it is, this is basically Obi-Wan dealing with the aftermath of Revenge of the Sith. After the Jedi Order has fallen apart, after the Republic's been destroyed, and the Empire has risen from the ashes, and the Jedi are... First of all, they're all but extinct, and what Jedi are left are essentially having to hide and go on the run. And so Kenobi is essentially having to transition himself from Jedi to, well, normal person. And that's a really hard thing for Obi-Wan. He's been a Jedi all his life. Whenever somebody needs help, it's his first instinct to go and help them, because that's what Jedi do. And that happens a few times here, and while Obi-Wan, of course, does help out however he can, he's always got this nagging feeling of, I really shouldn't be doing this. I should be hiding. I should be watching over Luke and all this. But it's just really, really hard for him. He's just dealing with that struggle of trying to maintain his anonymity. But it's just really hard for him. And there's a whole other subplot going on with this family that Obi-Wan kind of befriends, and they run this store that, sells stuff to people. And that's all interesting enough. But really, the stuff going on with Obi-Wan is the reason to read this. And yeah, so I think that's really about all I can say without getting too spoilery with this. But yeah, it's not a book I love, but it is a book I very much enjoy. So if that sounds interesting to you, check out Kenobi. I think it's quite good. All right, the next up is the Crimson Empire Saga, which is actually available in two forms. There's a comic book series for this, and then there's the audio drama. Now, I've not read the comic book, so I can't say anything for that, but the audio drama in particular, I can absolutely recommend. I think it's very, very good. It's very well done, very well acted, and just very well put together. It's really, really cool. And this basically follows somebody, I can't remember his name. I think it's Marcos or something like that. I forget the dude's name. But this basically follows somebody who is an ex-royal guard. This whole story takes place after Return of the Jedi, when the New Republic has already started to form and begun to reestablish itself onto the galaxy. And so we're following this guy who used to be part of the Imperial Royal Guard, and he's constantly talking about wanting to kill this person because this other person he's trying to kill is somebody who was also an Imperial Royal Guard, and he thinks that he is the reason that Palpatine died. You know, he thinks that he abandoned his duty and he betrayed their emperor, and because of that, Emperor Palpatine died. That's what he thinks. Now, obviously, we know that's not true, but this is what he thinks. And so he's after this guy, and this whole book is him, this whole story is him trying to get this guy and kill him. Now, that sounds really simple, but of course, this is Star Wars, so it does get a little more complicated and a little more complex than that. Having said that, it's still very, very good, and there's some interesting stuff done here. The only thing I don't really care for is the way it ends, specifically the last few lines that are spoken by this one girl that he kind of forms a friendship with. That whole ending, I think, was maybe done a little poorly. I don't want to sound harsh, but I wouldn't have, because I don't want to get into spoilers here. But simply put, the place she ends up at the end is not the place I would have put her if I were doing this. But other than that, this is still really good. If what I've described sounds interesting to you, I would absolutely recommend this. It's quite good. All right, so next up, and I told you I'd be getting back to this, and so here it is. It is the Force Unleashed novelization. Now, the Force Unleashed novelization, as I said with Revenge of the Sith, the video game, adds a lot of stuff back into the Force Unleashed story that unfortunately was not able to be in the game. I like to think of this as the novelization this is the Force Unleashed director's cut. So, like I said, a lot of things that were dropped for time or stuff that wasn't even able to happen because they just ran out of time, all that stuff is put back in here. And believe me when I say it adds so much to this story. It makes for some fantastic additions to the Force Unleashed, and it's just really, really great. It's not even that long either. It's I've only listened to the audiobook. I've not read the actual novel itself. It's not that long either, so it's not like you're going to be spending a huge chunk of your time getting to understand all of the ins and outs of this. There are some strange differences, though. Like, for instance, in the game, Starkiller uses a reverse grip variant form with his lightsaber, and the novel doesn't mention that at all. So you're kind of left to just assume he uses his lightsaber like everybody else does, and that's a little weird. But other than that, this is really, really cool. If you've played The Force Unleashed and you want to know all the other ins and outs of what happened and stuff that had to be dropped for time, I would absolutely recommend this. It's quite good. Alright, so the last up on my honorable mentions is probably the most obscure pick, aside from maybe I, Jedi, and that is, it's a duology. It's two novels, both of which are Clone Wars novels, and they're called MedStar 1, Battle Surgeons, and MedStar 2, Jedi Healer. Now, the reason I say these are probably the most obscure picks is because, first of all, like I, Jedi, I don't know too many people that talk about these. I came to these completely independently. I just kind of found them and decided, why not? I'll give them a try. And I ended up really, really liking these. Basically, as I said before, these are Clone Wars novels, so obviously they take place during the Clone Wars. On the planet Rensu, I think it's called. I think it's called the planet Rensu or something like that. I forget. But this whole story revolves around these two novels revolve around three sets of characters. One is these surgeons, these doctors that are stationed on the planet Rensu. Again, I think that's the planet's name. And their job is to attend to and help other patients and victims, mostly clone troopers who were wounded in battle during the Clone Wars. And so we're following them in their day-to-day lives, things that are happening. But then we also follow this news reporter by the name of Dan, I think is his name, or Den. It's either Dan or Den. Again, I listened to the audiobooks, and I think his name is Den or Dan, I forget. It's something like that. But he's really cool. I really like that dude. He seems a little slimy and untrustworthy at first, but especially by the end of that second book, I think he really proves himself to be a good guy. So he's a really cool dude. And then the third is actually Jedi. This is actually Jedi Padawan Barriss O'Fee, and she's actually here without the aid of her master Luminara, and she's dispatched to Rinsu 7. Yeah, I think that's the name of the planet. It's Rinsu 7. And she's dispatched there to help out because Bara Sophie is trained as a Jedi healer. So she obviously has a lot of useful abilities for helping wounded clones, nurse them back to health and everything so they can go back and fight in the Clone Wars. So we're mainly following those three sets of characters throughout these novels. Now, there are a few others that are brought up and dealt with as the novels go on, but those are our three main sets of characters, and I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, these books are really, really interesting. But the reason I have them so far down on this list and on my honorable mentions is because, as I said with Darth Plagueis, because when I talk about the Darth Plagueis novel, I said that this might not be for everyone. I doubly say that here with the MedStar duology, because before I went through them, I didn't think these would be for me, let alone everybody else. So I would at least recommend maybe check out a review or two, maybe get a plot synopsis off of Wikipedia or something like that, I don't know. Or maybe look it up on Amazon and see if you can find a basic plot synopsis there or something. And just see if you can get an idea of what these books are like and what they're about. And see if they interest you. Because if they do interest you, then I absolutely recommend these. But because they're such an obscure thing and such a, you have to like this sort of thing in order to even enjoy this, I would absolutely say check something out with it first. Like I said, maybe a plot synopsis or review or something. See if you can find something that'll give you an idea of what these are like and what they're all about. And if it sounds like it's to your liking, then I absolutely say go for it, because I think these are quite good. Alright, so that's going to do it for all of my Star Wars Legends recommendations. As I said before, I'll either post this as a response to Eric's video or something. I'm gonna figure something out here so that you can watch that and then watch mine, or you can watch mine and then watch his or something. I'm going to get something figured out here with all of that. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.